Now that your mixed media piece is finished from last class, we're going to look at the white spaces that are left over, or ways that you can add an additional layer of art making. So to begin with, I would get your Sharpie markers out and decide where could you fill in white space, or where could you add drawings on top of what's already here. So maybe I want to define the edge of my roller, where this was like a light purple, but then maybe I'm outlining the edge so this design stands out more. And I could do that consistently all throughout. Maybe I am taking a Sharpie color, or you could do this with crayons or colored pencils. And maybe I'm starting to color inside the lines of the stamp where that was the part that was carved away. So I could fill this in with color. You are welcome to draw any designs that you want on the surface. You're just trying to make your drawings enhance the overall piece, where you don't want your drawing to make it look like messy and sloppy or too chaotic. So I would do all the Sharpie or coloring with colored pencils first before you then decide to use the watercolor paints, because you cannot draw or color on top of wet watercolor paint. So you need to do all the drawing phase first before you start to use that watercolor. So when you are ready for the watercolor, you're going to get your tray of watercolor paints, and there are 2 cups that are glued to the surface. One cup will be filled with water about halfway. The other small cup has salt inside of it, and I'll show you how that can work. Okay, so watercolor paint is called watercolor because you have to have water to activate the paint. So you're going to dip your brush in the water cup, and then you need to paint the surface of whatever color you want to use. So maybe I'm going to paint some color over the top of this, and I think I'm going to use the pinkish color. So I'm going to get the surface of it wet, and then I can start painting right on this paper. It is okay to paint over the top of what was already there previously. So your crayon texture, the reason why I wanted you to use crayon was so that you could paint right over the top of it. The paint's gonna stay on the white paper, and then the crayon is gonna emerge in the surface because the crayon is made of wax and that resists water. So if you want your paint to be lighter, add a little more water on your brush and it will spread that out. And then I'll show you how you can use that salt technique. So if you want to use salt, you have to have wet paint. So with watercolor paint, the more paint that's on your brush and less water, the brighter the color the paint is going to be. Okay, so before this dries, I carefully take the lid off. I take a pinch of salt between my fingers. So I just got a little pinch of it. And now I'm going to sprinkle that salt right on top of my wet paint. And the salt is going to absorb the paint color, and it's going to start to make spots in your paint. But this only works if the paint is wet. So you can see in the camera where the salt was, it's now darker because it's absorbing the paint color underneath it. Then what you do is you leave that to dry overnight, and then the next time you come to class you can brush that off and you'll see these little speckles where your paint was. So I want you to work on the rest of this page, filling it with drawings and colorings. Do all the drawing first and then move on to painting today. If you finish this and there's nowhere else to draw or put colors, you're going to leave this on the side of your desk, and then I want you to take out the altered paper that you worked on last class and continue to draw in color on these papers until those pages are full. So a little bit more information about the watercolor paint. As you work, you need to clean your brush between colors. These paints should not be getting contaminated, meaning I should not take the black paint and then switch to yellow paint because now my yellow paint has black in it. You need to rinse your brush in the water cup, dry that brush off, and then switch to your new color. But you can clean the tops of these off with your paper towel just by soaking that up. As you paint, there should not be so much water in this tray that the paint color is now starting to leak out from its individual spot into other places. If you have so much water in there that it's starting to spill over, get your paper towel and soak that up. Okay. Then, in general, when you are painting, you always want to paint moving the brush side to side, or you can paint pulling the brush backwards, but you don't want to paint by smashing that brush down and then scrubbing it in circles, because that's going to start to change the shape of the end of your paintbrush. So side to side is fine and pulling backwards is fine. You never push a paintbrush and you never push it down straight on top and circle it as you paint. You want to be moving that brush side to side to save the bristles. Then at the end of the period, you need to rinse your brush off, dry it off. Then any water that's left in this paint tray, you're going to soak it up with your paper towel. You need to put the lid back on top of your salt container, and then you are going to be emptying your paint cup in a bucket. Alright, so once you've dried up the tops of the paints and the salt lid is on, what you're going to do is you're going to hold onto the top of the salt lid, you're going to put your hands across your paint trays, and then when I come around with that bucket, you're going to turn that tray over and you're going to dump out the water from that cup. The cup is glued onto the tray, so it should still be attached. If you don't hold on to your paint palettes, these are going to fall out when they tip over. No big deal, just pick them up, put them back in. And then you're going to keep this tray at your desk. Use your paper towel to dry up any water that's on your messy mat, and that's how we will do cleanup. Alright, another option that you can do before you paint is to draw with crayons. So just like you did texture rubbings, you could just take a crayon and you could draw anywhere on top of the dried paint, or you could take your crayon and you could color inside the lines of the stamp. Because crayons are made of wax, so that will repel the paint as well. So the harder you press, the more the wax is going to repel the water, so the more the color is going to show up through the paint surface. And then once you're done with your crayon, then you can take your paint, and now I can paint right over the top of this, and the crayon's still going to show through because it's repelling the paint color.